Let me tell you about a time my world got flipped upside down. My name is Betty, and I'm 68 years old. I was just sitting in my kitchen, minding my own business, when I heard my granddaughter Jessica say something that hit me like a ton of bricks. I hope she dies before the wedding so I don't have to deal with her anymore. Then I'd get the inheritance too and could plan the wedding I actually want. Those words, my own granddaughter, about me. I wasn't supposed to hear them. It was a quiet Tuesday, and I was going through Jessica's wedding bills. She was planning her dream wedding, and I was helping her make it happen. I heard her voice from the living room. She was on the phone, sounding relaxed and casual, with no idea I was in the next room. "I can't wait until this wedding is over," she started. I paused, my pen frozen above the invoices. "Grandma keeps trying to give her opinions about everything. It's so embarrassing. My friends keep asking why she's so involved." My heart started to sink, but I told myself she was just stressed. Weddings are a big deal, especially for a 24-year-old. I kept listening, hoping for something kinder. "I wish she'd just pay for it and stay out of it," she went on. It felt like a slap in the face. Here I was, looking at $80,000 worth of contracts, all in my name, all my responsibility, and she saw me as a bother with a checkbook. Before we dive deeper into the story, please leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and subscribe to our channel timelines. We're creating a community of incredible people who know that our best chapters can happen at any age. Now, back to the story. Then came the words that stopped my heart. I just sat there, staring at those papers. Every single one had my signature. The fancy venue, the food, the flowers, the pictures, the music, all my choices. Then I heard her laugh, a sound that used to bring me so much joy. I know it sounds awful, but she's got to have at least $1 million saved up. If she died now, I'd get that money, plus not have to deal with her interfering anymore. I slowly got up, walked to my home office, and pulled out my old business filing cabinet. 20 years of running my restaurant, Betty's Kitchen, had taught me a thing or two about contracts. As I looked through the wedding agreements, I saw something Jessica hadn't. I wasn't just paying for this wedding. I was the boss, the main client on every single paper. I picked up my phone and for the first time in weeks, I smiled. It was time to make some calls that would change everything. But first, let me tell you how it all began, so you understand how someone I loved more than anything could wish me dead while I was spending my life savings on her happiness. Because what happened next wasn't about getting even. It was about respect, about feeling important, and about realizing that even at 68, I still had a lot more power than anyone thought. My name is Betty Richardson. I live in Springfield, Missouri, and I've been a widow for 3 years, ever since my dear Harold passed away. He was a good man and left me comfortable. Jessica is my son Michael's daughter, my only granddaughter, and she's always been the light of my life. She's 24 and works in marketing. Last year, she got engaged to her boyfriend, Brad, and when she called me, crying with happiness, I was thrilled for her. Before I retired, I owned Betty's Kitchen for 2 decades. I learned how to deal with suppliers, read contracts, manage money, and handle all sorts of people. I wasn't just some sweet old lady who didn't know how the world worked. I knew business. When Jessica got engaged, she and Brad talked about a small, intimate wedding. They had about $5,000 saved, enough for a simple ceremony with maybe 50 guests. But Jessica kept dreaming of the fancy weddings she saw in magazines, with beautiful flowers and grand venues. One night, she was at my house, sighing over bridal magazines. "I wish we could afford something like this," she said, showing me pictures of big parties. "But I guess we'll just have to make do." That's when I made a choice I thought would bring us closer. "Sweetheart," I said, "what if Grandma helped make your dream wedding come true?" Her face lit up. She hugged me tight and called me the best grandma ever. For the next month, we planned together. Jessica's dream wedding would cost $80,000. I know it's a lot, but I could afford it. With Harold's life insurance, our savings, and my restaurant money, I had enough to give her this gift. I paid $15,000 in deposits and signed all the contracts as the main client. The beautiful country club, the fancy 5-course dinner, the professional photographer, the amazing florist, even a string quartet. The rest of the $65,000 would be due a month before the wedding. My son Michael and his wife Karen were so thankful. Karen even said, "Betty, you're making dreams come true for our family." I felt so proud. The wedding was set for 6 weeks away. Everything was perfect, all deposits paid. I couldn't wait to see Jessica walk down the aisle. I thought I was giving her the most wonderful gift. I never imagined she'd see my generosity as meddling, or that she'd wish I wasn't there to see the wedding I was paying for. But I was about to learn some hard truths about what my own family really thought of me. About 2 months into the planning, Jessica started changing. Little things at first, which I tried to ignore, blaming wedding stress. The first big incident was with the florist. I suggested adding white roses to her bouquet. They were my wedding flowers, a sweet family touch. Jessica immediately made a sour face. "Grandma, that's so old-fashioned," she said, rolling her eyes right in front of the florist. "We're going for a more modern look. White roses are from the 1950s. I felt embarrassed and hurt, but I just said, "Of course, dear. It's your wedding." The florist looked uncomfortable. Her dismissive attitude continued. Every idea I had was met with, "That's not the vibe we're going for," or, "My friends would think that's weird." When I mentioned my friends were excited to come, Jessica frowned and said, "We need to keep the guest count small, Grandma. Your friends won't really fit in with our crowd." I was paying for everything, but my opinions, my friends, and my feelings didn't seem to matter at all. The worst part was when she started leaving me out of important decisions. One day, she had a cake tasting scheduled. I showed up at the bakery, only to find out the appointment had been moved earlier, and no one told me. "Oh, didn't I mention it?" Jessica said when I called. "We had to change the time, and I figured you didn't need to be there for every little detail." But this wasn't a little detail. This was a $1,500 cake I was buying, and I wasn't even invited to help pick it out. Jessica began scheduling meetings with vendors without me, making choices about thousands of dollars I was spending. She treated me like an interfering busybody, instead of the person making her dream wedding possible. The final straw came when I found out she'd completely changed the guest list. My dear friend, Ruth, called me, wondering if she'd done something wrong because she never got an invitation. "Ruth, what do you mean?" I asked, confused. "Of course you're invited. I gave Jessica your address weeks ago." That's when I learned Jessica had taken not just Ruth, but 6 of my closest friends off the list. When I asked her about it, she just shrugged. "We needed to make cuts somewhere. And honestly, your friends won't really understand the type of wedding we're having." I felt like I'd been slapped. These women had been my friends for decades, through Harold's death, and they were excited to celebrate with me. But to Jessica, they weren't good enough for her expensive wedding. "Jessica, these are important people in my life," I said, trying to stay calm. "If I'm paying for this wedding, I should be able to invite my friends." "Grandma, you're being dramatic," she replied. "It's not about you. It's about Brad and me having the perfect day we want." I started noticing other things, too. When Jessica's friends came over during planning, she'd get uncomfortable if they asked about me. Once, I heard her tell a friend, "Yeah, my grandmother is really into this wedding planning stuff. She has opinions about everything." Her tone made it clear that my involvement was a source of embarrassment, not gratitude. Another time, I suggested a memory table with photos of family who had passed, including Harold. Jessica immediately said, "That's so depressing. We want people to be happy, not thinking about dead people." I felt like a burden, not a beloved grandmother. Every talk became about managing my interference instead of celebrating together. I was good enough to pay for everything, but not good enough to have any say in what I was buying. The pattern was clear. Jessica wanted my money, but she didn't want me. She saw me as a problem to her perfect day, not the person making it possible. And sadly, Michael and Karen never stepped in. They seemed to think that as long as I was paying, I should just accept whatever treatment I got. I started to dread our planning sessions. What should have been a joyful time with my granddaughter turned into a series of put-downs. But I kept telling myself that once the wedding was over, things would go back to normal. I had no idea how much worse it was about to get. 4 weeks before the wedding, I was supposed to meet Jessica at her apartment to pick out wedding favors. She asked me to come at 2 p.m. to look at samples. They were small silver picture frames, about $8 each for 150 guests. I arrived at her building around 1:45 p.m., wanting to be on time. Jessica had given me a key last winter when she was sick with pneumonia, so I could check on her. I kept it because she said it made her feel safer. As I walked up to her door, I could hear Jessica's voice through the thin walls. She was on the phone, speaking normally, not whispering. She had no idea I was early. I quietly unlocked the door and stepped inside, planning to wait in the kitchen until she finished her call. But I couldn't help but hear what she was saying. "Sarah, I'm so exhausted from all this wedding planning," Jessica was telling her maid of honor. "And the worst part is dealing with my grandmother." I froze. She was talking about me. "She keeps trying to give her opinions about everything," Jessica continued. "The flowers, the music, the guest list, even the wedding favors. It's so embarrassing. She has these old-fashioned ideas about what a wedding should be like." My heart started to pound. I knew I should leave, but I couldn't move. I needed to hear what she really thought. "My friends keep asking why she's so involved in everything," Jessica said, her voice filled with frustration. "They think it's weird that someone her age is so into planning a young person's wedding. Like, doesn't she have her own life?" Sarah must have said something because Jessica laughed, but it was a mean laugh. "Exactly," Jessica said. "I keep trying to hint that she should back off, but she doesn't get it. She thinks because she's paying for everything, she gets to have opinions about every little detail." I felt like someone had punched me. Here I was, spending my life savings, and she saw me as an embarrassing burden. But it got worse. "I wish she would just write the check and disappear," Jessica said, her voice getting more animated, like she was enjoying complaining. "She's ruining my perfect day with her constant input. This is supposed to be about me and Brad, not about making my grandmother feel included." I gripped the kitchen counter, feeling dizzy. After all our planning, all the excitement I thought we shared, all her hugs and thanks, this was how she really felt. "You know what the worst part is?" Jessica continued. "She acts like she's doing me this huge favor, but honestly, she's probably just lonely and desperate for attention. Like, get a hobby, you know?" Sarah must have said something, because Jessica laughed again. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. "Sometimes I think about what it would be like if she just wasn't around anymore," Jessica said casually, as if talking about the weather. "Like if she died tomorrow, I wouldn't have to deal with all her opinions and interference." I couldn't breathe. My own granddaughter was talking about my death like it would be convenient for her. But she wasn't done. "Actually, that would solve a lot of problems," Jessica said, and I heard her moving around the room, probably pacing like she did when she got excited. "I mean, I know it sounds terrible, but think about it. If she died before the wedding, I wouldn't have to deal with her trying to control everything, and I'd inherit whatever money she has left." "I've been thinking about this," Jessica continued, her voice taking on a cold, calculating tone I'd never heard before. "She's got to have at least $1 million saved up. She owned that restaurant for 20 years, plus whatever my grandfather left her. If she died now, I'd get all that money and could plan the wedding I actually want, not the one she's trying to force on me." I felt like I was going to be sick. She had figured out how much I was worth. She had thought about my death and decided it would be profitable for her. "God, Sarah, I know how awful this sounds," Jessica said, but she didn't sound sorry at all. "But honestly, I hope she dies before the wedding so I don't have to deal with her anymore. Then I'd get the inheritance too and could plan the wedding I actually want." There it was, the words that would forever echo in my mind. My beloved granddaughter, the girl I'd raised when Michael and Karen were busy, the child I'd spoiled and loved, was literally wishing for my death. "She thinks she's helping," Jessica continued, "but she's just making everything harder. I can't wait until this wedding is over. and I don't have to pretend to care about her opinions anymore. The thing is, Jessica said, and I heard her sit down. She's so naive about business stuff. She thinks because she ran some little restaurant in the middle of nowhere, she understands contracts and vendor relationships. But she doesn't realize that once you sign with vendors, you're locked in. She can't back out now without losing all the deposits. Plus, Jessica added, she's too sweet to ever actually follow through on any threats. She's one of those people who just wants everyone to be happy. She'd never do anything to hurt me, even if I hurt her first. I stood there in her kitchen, holding onto the counter for support. My granddaughter had not only wished for my death, but had also completely underestimated who I was and what I could do. You know what the funniest part is? Jessica said, her voice filled with excitement. She signed all the contracts as the primary client because she wanted to take care of everything for me. But she doesn't understand that now she's legally responsible for all the payments. Even if she wanted to back out, she'd lose thousands of dollars in deposits. She's trapped. Sarah must have said something encouraging because Jessica laughed triumphantly. Exactly. She made herself the perfect victim. She's paying for everything. She has no legal way to get out of it. And I can treat her however I want because what's she going to do? Cancel her precious granddaughter's wedding? She loves me too much to ever do that. I quietly placed the wedding favor samples on her kitchen counter and wrote a quick note. Had an emergency. We'll talk later. Love, Grandma. Then I left, closing the door as softly as I could. As I walked to my car, I kept thinking about what Jessica had said. She thought I was trapped. She thought I was too sweet, too naive, too desperate for her love to ever stand up for myself. She was about to learn how wrong she was about her grandmother. I drove home in a daze, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Jessica's voice replayed in my head. I hope she dies before the wedding. Those words repeated as I pulled into my driveway and sat in my car, trying to process it all. When I finally went inside, I collapsed on my bed and cried harder than I had since Harold died. This wasn't just about money or wedding planning. This was about finding out that someone I loved more than life itself actually wished I was dead. I spent the entire evening in that bedroom, going through every memory I had with Jessica, teaching her to bake cookies at 5, helping with homework, being there for every birthday, every school play, every important moment, taking care of her when she was sick, supporting her through her first heartbreak, celebrating her first job. And through it all, I kept hearing her voice. She's so naive about business stuff. She thinks because she ran some little restaurant in the middle of nowhere, she understands contracts and vendor relationships. That comment hurt almost as much as the death wish. Jessica had dismissed 20 years of my business experience like it was nothing. She had no idea what it took to run a restaurant, manage vendors, negotiate contracts, and handle the financial pressures of keeping a business alive. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Jessica laughing about how I was trapped by the contracts. She thought I was some helpless old woman who'd gotten herself into a situation she couldn't escape. The next morning I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, staring at the wedding planning binder. Months of work, months of excitement, months of believing I was doing something beautiful for someone I loved. But Jessica saw it all as interference and embarrassment. That's when I remembered something from my restaurant days. I walked to my home office and pulled out my filing cabinet, the same one I'd used for Betty's kitchen. I'd always kept meticulous records, always read every contract carefully, always understood exactly what I was signing. I pulled out every single wedding contract and spread them across my desk. The venue, the catering, the florist, the photographer, the string quartet, the cake designer, even the limo service. One by one, I read through each contract carefully, focusing on the cancellation clauses. What I discovered made me smile for the first time in 24 hours. Every single contract was signed by me as the primary client, not just as a guarantor or financial backer. This meant I wasn't just paying for services someone else had arranged. I was the actual customer, the one with decision-making power, the one with cancellation rights. Even better, most of the contracts had 30-day cancellation clauses with different penalty fees. Since the wedding was still 4 weeks away, I was well within the cancellation window for most services. I started doing the math. I'd already paid $15,000 in deposits. If I canceled everything now, I'd lose most of those deposits, but I'd avoid the remaining $65,000 in final payments due in the next 2 weeks. $15,000 was a lot to lose, but it was better than throwing away another $65,000 on someone who wished I was dead. I picked up the phone and called my attorney, Robert Chen, who had handled Harold's estate and my restaurant business. "Robert, I need some advice about contract cancellation," I said. "Of course, Betty. What's the situation?" I explained about the wedding contracts, leaving out Jessica's cruel words. I just told him I needed to understand my rights as the primary client. "Let me be clear," Robert said. "You signed these contracts as the primary client, not just as a guarantor. That means you have every right to cancel these services with proper notice. You'll lose your deposits, but you're not legally obligated to continue with services you no longer want." "Even though it's for my granddaughter's wedding?" I asked. "It doesn't matter who the wedding is for," he replied. "You're the client. You contracted for these services. You can cancel them for any reason or no reason at all, as long as you follow the cancellation procedures outlined in each contract." That afternoon, I called my banker, Helen Morrison, who had managed my accounts since I opened the restaurant. I wanted to know my exact financial position. "Helen, I need to know my exact liquid assets," I said. "I'm considering making some changes to some significant commitments I've made." Helen pulled up my accounts. "Betty, between your savings, your CDs, and your money market accounts, you have about $450,000 in liquid assets, plus your house is worth about $300,000 and it's completely paid off. And that doesn't include the inheritance from my sister Elizabeth last month." "Oh, that's right," Helen said. "The estate settlement added another $400,000 to your portfolio. I hadn't included that in my initial calculation." I sat back. I had over $800,000 in liquid assets, plus a paid-off house. Jessica had guessed I had at least $1 million, and she wasn't wrong, but she had no idea I'd recently inherited substantially more. "Helen, if I were to cancel some contracts and lose about $15,000 in deposits, how would that affect my financial position?" "Betty, $15,000 would be less than 2% of your liquid assets. You'd barely notice it financially speaking." That evening, I sat in my living room with a legal pad and listed every vendor. Next to each name, I wrote the deposit I'd lose and the final payment I'd save by canceling. The math was simple: lose $15,000, save $65,000 for a net savings of $50,000. But this wasn't really about the money. This was about dignity and self-respect. I'd been in business long enough to know that you don't keep doing business with people who don't respect you, and you certainly don't fund the dreams of people who wish you were dead. I thought about Jessica's comment that I was too sweet to ever do anything to hurt her. She was right that I didn't want to hurt her, but I also wasn't going to keep paying for someone who saw me as an embarrassing burden. I realized Jessica had made 2 big mistakes. First, she'd assumed I was too emotional to make a business decision. Second, she'd underestimated my business smarts and legal understanding. "She made herself the perfect victim," Jessica had said about me. "She's paying for everything. She has no legal way to get out of it, and I can treat her however I want, because what's she going to do?" But I wasn't a victim. I was a businesswoman who'd run a successful restaurant for 2 decades. I knew how to read contracts, manage vendors, and make tough decisions when necessary. The next morning, I called Robert again. "Robert, I've decided to cancel all the wedding contracts. Can you help me make sure I do this properly?" "Of course, Betty. Do you want to tell me what's changed?" "Let's just say I've learned some things about the people I was trying to help, and I've decided my money would be better spent elsewhere." "I understand. Let me review each contract and prepare the cancellation notices. We'll want to send them certified mail to ensure proper documentation." "Perfect. And Robert, I want to be very clear about something. I'm not canceling because I'm angry or trying to punish anyone. I'm canceling because I refuse to fund people who don't respect me." That's a very reasonable business decision, Betty. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in years. I booked a cruise, a 2-week Alaska cruise I'd always wanted to take but never felt I could afford. It would cost exactly $50,000 for the luxury suite I'd always dreamed of. $50,000. The exact amount I'd save by canceling Jessica's wedding. As I gave the travel agent my credit card information, I realized something important. For the first time in 3 years, I was spending money on myself instead of on people who didn't appreciate me. I was done being the sweet, naive grandmother who could be taken advantage of. I was done funding people who wished I was dead. I was done accepting disrespect in exchange for the privilege of being generous. Jessica thought she had me figured out. She thought I was trapped, weak, and too loving to ever stand up for myself. She was about to learn how wrong she was. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. I made myself breakfast, got dressed in my best business suit, and sat down at my desk with the stack of cancellation letters Robert had prepared. I started with the venue. Maple Ridge Country Club had been Jessica's dream location with its beautiful gardens and elegant ballroom. I called the events coordinator, Mrs. Patterson, whom I'd worked with for months. "Mrs. Patterson, this is Betty Richardson. I need to cancel the wedding reception scheduled for 4 weeks from Saturday." There was a pause. "Oh my, Mrs. Richardson, I'm so sorry to hear that. Is everything all right?" "There have been some family circumstances that have made it necessary to cancel." "I understand. I'll forfeit my deposit." "Yes. Unfortunately, the $3,000 deposit is non-refundable at this point, but you won't be responsible for the remaining $12,000 in final payments." "That's exactly what I expected. Please send me written confirmation of the cancellation." Next was the catering company, a 5-course dinner for 150 guests with a $10,000 balance due in 10 days. Elegant Events Catering. This is Monica. "Monica, this is Betty Richardson. I need to cancel the catering service for the Richardson-Wilson wedding." "Oh no. I'm so sorry to hear that, Mrs. Richardson. You'll lose your $2,000 deposit, but you won't owe the final payment." "I understand. Please send me written confirmation." One by one, I calmly called every vendor: the florist, the photographer, the string quartet, the cake designer, the limo service. Each conversation was professional and brief. Each vendor expressed sympathy and confirmed the same thing. I'd lose my deposit, but save thousands in final payments. By noon, I had canceled $80,000 worth of wedding services. I'd lost $15,000 in deposits, but I'd saved $65,000 in final payments. Then I sat back and waited. The first call came 2 days later. It was Thursday afternoon, and I was in my garden when my phone rang. "Grandma?" Jessica's voice was shaky. "I just got the strangest call from Maple Ridge Country Club. They said you canceled the reception venue. But that can't be right, can it? There must be some mistake." "There's no mistake, Jessica," I said calmly. "I canceled all the wedding vendors yesterday." "What? But why? What happened?" "I heard your conversation with Sarah on Tuesday. The one where you said you hoped I would die before the wedding so you could get my inheritance and plan the wedding you actually wanted." The silence on the other end was deafening. "Grandma, I was just stressed. I didn't mean—" "You calculated my net worth, Jessica. You said I was naive about business and that I was trapped by the contracts I'd signed. You called me an embarrassing burden and said you couldn't wait to stop pretending to care about my opinions. I was just venting. I didn't mean any of it. You meant every word, and you were wrong about something important. I'm not trapped by those contracts. I was the primary client, which means I had every right to cancel them. And I'm not naive about business. I spent 20 years successfully running a restaurant." "But Grandma, the wedding is in 3 weeks. What am I supposed to do?" "That's not my problem to solve anymore, Jessica. You wanted to plan your own wedding without my interference. Now you can." The phone calls from the family started within hours. First, Michael called, then Karen, then Brad. Each conversation was a variation of the same theme: disbelief, anger, and desperate attempts to get me to change my mind. "Mom, you can't do this to Jessica," Michael said. She's your granddaughter. She made a mistake, but she's young. She's 24 years old, Michael. She's old enough to understand that wishing someone dead while spending their money has consequences. But she didn't mean it literally. She calculated my inheritance value and said she hoped I would die so she could get the money and plan a different wedding. How exactly am I supposed to interpret that? Karen called next, crying. Betty, please, you have to understand. Jessica is just overwhelmed with wedding planning. She loves you so much. If she loves me, she has a strange way of showing it. She removed my friends from the guest list, excluded me from vendor meetings, and dismissed every suggestion I made, all while I was paying for everything. We'll pay you back. We'll find a way to cover the costs. With what money, Karen? You couldn't afford this wedding before I offered to pay for it. Nothing has changed except that Jessica showed me her true feelings. Brad called too. The poor young man. Mrs. Richardson, I'm so sorry about what Jessica said. She was just stressed and she didn't mean any of it. Please, isn't there some way we can work this out? I almost felt sorry for him. He seemed genuinely shocked by what Jessica had said. Brad, I'm not angry with you, but I'm not going to continue funding someone who wishes I was dead. Jessica is free to plan whatever wedding she can afford on her own. The most dramatic call came from Jessica herself the next day. She was sobbing hysterically. Grandma, I called all the vendors. They want $65,000 to reinstate the services. We don't have that kind of money. You know we don't have that kind of money. I know exactly what you can afford, Jessica. You were planning a $5,000 wedding before I offered to help. You can still have that wedding. But all my friends are expecting this beautiful wedding. The invitations are already sent. Everyone knows it's going to be at Maple Ridge. Then you'll have to explain to your friends why the plans changed. Perhaps you can tell them that you wished your grandmother was dead and she decided not to fund your dream wedding anymore. I didn't mean it. I was just frustrated. Jessica, you didn't just say you were frustrated. You said you hoped I would die. You calculated how much money you'd inherit. You called me naive and said I was trapped. Those weren't words spoken in frustration. Those were your true feelings. Please, Grandma, I'll apologize. I'll do anything. Just please don't ruin my wedding. I'm not ruining your wedding, Jessica. I'm simply not paying for it anymore. You can still get married. You just can't do it on my dime while wishing I was dead. The calls continued for several days. Michael suggested family counseling. Karen offered to have Jessica write me a letter of apology. Brad's parents even called to offer to mediate, but I was done. I'd made my decision based on business principles that had served me well for decades. You don't continue doing business with people who don't respect you. 2 weeks later, I received a wedding invitation in the mail. Jessica and Brad were getting married at the local community center with a reception in the fellowship hall. The invitation was printed on simple cardstock, nothing like the elegant letterpress invitations that had been ordered for the original wedding. I didn't attend. Instead, I was on a cruise ship in Alaska, watching glaciers from the deck of my luxury suite. I'd used the money I'd saved from canceling Jessica's wedding to give myself the trip of a lifetime. The cruise was everything I dreamed it would be. I made new friends, saw incredible sights, and enjoyed the kind of luxury I'd never allowed myself before. For the first time in years, I was spending money on someone who appreciated it, myself. When I returned home, I found a thank you card from Jessica in my mailbox. It was a simple card with a photo from her wedding. She and Brad looked happy, standing in front of a simple backdrop in the community center. Inside, she'd written, "Dear Grandma, thank you for everything you taught me about respect and consequences. I understand now why you made the decision you did. I hope someday I can earn back your trust and your love. Love, Jessica." I kept the card, but I didn't call her. Some lessons take time to fully sink in, and I wanted to make sure Jessica truly understood what she'd lost before I considered rebuilding our relationship. 3 months later, I updated my will. Jessica's inheritance went to several charities instead. I also established a scholarship fund for young women starting their own businesses, using the money I'd originally planned to leave to someone who had wished I was dead. I learned something important during this whole experience. It's never too late to demand respect. At 68 years old, I discovered that I still had the power to make choices that honored my own dignity and self-worth. Jessica got married, just not the wedding she'd planned, and I got something more valuable than any wedding could have provided. I got my self-respect back. Sometimes love means saying no. Sometimes generosity means stopping the flow of money to people who don't appreciate it. And sometimes the best gift you can give someone is to let them experience the consequences of their own choices. My money, my choice, my dignity was worth more than any wedding. And I sleep peacefully, knowing that I don't fund people who wish me dead. So that's my story. I'd love to hear what you think. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to protect your own dignity, even when it meant disappointing someone you loved? Let me know in the comments and subscribe if you want to hear more stories like mine.